All
So
right.
it's 11. Oh, sure. So I think we can get started now. It's 11:35.
Yes, so we'll go ahead and get started. Dana, thank you. I'm going to have you go ahead and remove the screen. I appreciate it. All right. Can you guys hear me? Okay, perfect. Thank you. Okay. Good morning, everyone, and thank you for being with us today for our 5th session of Conversations from the Heart. My name is Rebecca. I'm a member of the New York Black Librarians Caucus, and I'm one of the organizers of these sessions, along with my colleague and friend, Emily Dowie. Before we get started, I'd like to invite everyone to click on the Participants tab and rename yourself to include your pronouns. As we prepare to listen to a conversation about allyship, it's important that we don't overlook the small things we can do to create safe spaces for each other. Now, I'd like to start off by acknowledging the heaviness and exhaustion that many of us are carrying with us today. Less than 1 week ago, Jacob Blake, a father, a son, a brother, a grandson, a friend, was shot in the back 7 times by police in Kenosha, Wisconsin. Let me be transparent. I have not watched this video. I am done watching Black people suffering at the hands of the police. I am done participating in the circulation of Black people's pain with the hope that justice will come of it. I am done participating in the circulation of Black trauma while people expose their own superiority complexes and justify murder. What a nightmare to consider Jacob one of the lucky ones, to be alive but paralyzed for the rest of his life, to be alive but have to work through his trauma and his children's trauma for the rest of theirs. His children that had to witness their father being gunned down by a man wearing a uniform that is supposed to represent protection. As we head into today's session, I ask you to keep Jacob Blake in your spirit. I ask you to keep Breonna Taylor in your spirit. I ask you to keep Black trans women in your spirit. Going into this discussion, please understand that the conversation we're having today is a crucial one. To my brothers and sisters, please know that I see you. Please know that I understand you're exhausted. Please know that I am here with you in solidarity. Thank you for being here despite the trauma that is constantly filling your days and filling your hearts. To our white colleagues and friends, being here is the first step. On a better day, I might have thanked you for showing up. I might have shared my appreciation, but not today. Today, I am letting you know that it's not enough. Today, I am letting you know that we require more of your allyship. Today, I want to declare that neutrality is off the table. As librarians, we are told and we regurgitate that libraries are for everyone, but this can no longer be true. We cannot open our doors to hate and somehow expect safety to coexist. So on behalf of the New York Black Librarians Caucus, we say no to hate, we say no to injustice. We say Black Lives Matter, we say all Black Lives Matter. And now I'd like to introduce our moderator, Taina Evans, Regional Librarian for Brooklyn Public Library and incoming Vice President of the New York Black Librarians Caucus. Thank you, Taina.
Thank you, Rebecca. I also want to begin with a couple of acknowledgements and offering deep gratitude to the Lenape people and for their ancestral homeland, Lenape-Hoken, which we call New York City and part of the greater New York. And I know many of you are joining us from San Francisco, PA, East Meadow, but I really wanted to acknowledge that racism impacts the life of BIPOC communities, which is Black, Indigenous, people of color. And together we stand for Jacob Black and the lives tragically and recently lost, such as Breonna Taylor, Ahmaud Arbery, and everyone that Rebecca so passionately captured in her introductions. I also want to individually acknowledge our trans woman, Shaki Peters, and our 2 allies who lost their life in Wisconsin by the hand of a 17-year-old vigilante, all those who came before and all those who have came after them. So I'm going to give some brief introductions. We have an amazing panelist today. Thank you, Peyton. I want to introduce Jeremy Johansson, NYLA's executive director. He's a skilled nonprofit leader with 15 years of experience in all facets of organizational management with membership services, PR, and marketing. To development from board relations, Jeremy guides all day-to-day operations within New York Library Association. So before I introduce the rest of the panelists, Jeremy, can you begin by kind of telling us why is allyship important to you all, to you within your work, and then everyone else? I'm going to ask you the same questions after I introduce you.
Absolutely. Thank you, Tayana. And thank you to the caucus and to Emily and to Rebecca for the whole series, putting this together. It's really been phenomenal, and excited to have it happen, and honored to be part of the panel today. New York Library Association is a membership organization, so being inclusive should be intrinsic to the nature of the work. Most importantly, NYLA can't recognize its full potential of sharing best practices if the discussion that shaped those exemplars aren't informed by diverse voices that represent the entire community. And more broadly, I am a living embodiment of privilege. I think you'd be hard pressed to find someone that can check more boxes on every possible good fortune. So my entire existence is coming from that spot. And so I was raised to take whatever action you can. If you see something that's wrong and it's within your power to fix it, that you take those steps, from picking up the piece of trash on the street and right on up. So yeah, I will tell everyone today that when Rebecca asked if I would participate, I was hesitant. That there's got to be somebody that's better than that. But so I'm here to do my best and participate in the conversation. And so I'm honored and thank you all.
Thank you, Jeremy. We're so honored to have you on the panel and your amazing work for the Greater New York. Elizabeth Portillo is the head of youth services at the Finkelstein Memorial Library in Spring Valley, New York. She has worked in libraries for the last decade throughout Westchester County, as well as her brief stint in Connecticut. She's currently serving as the advocacy chair for the Ramapo Catskills Library System Coalition for Library Workers of Color. Elizabeth, why is allyship important to you within your work?
So allyship is something that is very deeply personal to me. I'm a biracial person. I am half white and half Latina, and I have kind of seen it both ways. In many ways, I've grown up with a lot of white privilege, but I've also experienced what it's like to be judged for the color of your skin. And that is but a mere glimpse compared to what the Black community faces every day. But it is a glimpse that a lot of white people don't have. So I've really tried to use my position almost as like a bridge to provide context and start a lot of these conversations. I've been watching all of these. They've been so fantastic for me to gain more insight. They really have been like conversations. So I'm so happy to be included in this today, because I think that this is a conversation that we need to really start to have. And in my position at my current library, I have a very diverse staff and a very diverse patronage. And I really strive to bring that personal knowledge that I have to my work every day, because I know what it's like to feel like an outsider. So anyone that comes into my department, whether a patron or a staff member, I want them to feel like they are welcome, like they are comfortable and safe. And if that even changes one person's feeling, then that's a great first step. We need the big steps too, but we need to be making those little steps.
Thank you. Thank you for being on the panel, and hopefully you'll be able to provide some of those next steps for many of our attendees today. Karina Haglin is a disabled, genderqueer, femme artist, librarian, and community organizer based in Ithaca, New York. Most recently, they served as an outreach and instructional librarian at Cornell University and a first-year academic librarian blogger for the Association of College and Research Libraries. Karina has a BA in American Studies, a certificate in LGBT Studies, and an MLIS, all from the University of Maryland, College Park. Their research interests include feminist pedagogies, critical librarianship, disability justice, creative instruction, trauma-informed librarianship, and zines. More about their work can be found at karinakilljoy.com. Karina, why is allyship important to you within your work?
So my work as a librarian is deeply informed by my work as a community organizer. I believe that liberation is joyful and interdependent work. So if I want to thrive, like all of us need to thrive, and I believe that we deserve to not only survive, but really thrive. And that's why I continue to try and practice allyship every day.
Thank you. Thriving, a good and adaptive skill. Also joining us is Rebecca Rod. Rebecca is currently an agent's assistant at Levine Greenberg Roston Literary Agency. And prior to this position, she worked as a library and information supervisor for Brooklyn Public Library at the Sunset Park branch. She holds a BA from Spelman College and an MLIS from CUNY Queens College, where she was a recipient of the 2017 NYBLC, New York Black Librarian Caucus Donna Hoke Scholarship, and the 2007 NYLA, NYLA, and NYBLC Diversity and Inclusion Scholarship. Excuse me. Rebecca, please share with us why allyship is important to you within your work.
Thank you, Taina. I just want to let everybody know that I am filling in for Joyce at the moment. So thank you for welcoming me here to this space. When I was in grad school, I had a professor who said that librarianship was an activist profession, and that has forever stuck with me. I carry that with me every day. As a woman of color, there are ways that I want and expect my peers to stand up for me when I don't have the voice to do so. And I understand that a part of that is leading by example, right? And what I want people to do for me, I want to show that I'm willing to do for others. So allyship for me is making sure that I acknowledge my privilege, right? As a biracial woman, as a woman of lighter skin, there is privilege that I have in my life, and to make sure that I am being present and standing up for dark Black women who are definitely receiving the brunt of the burden that society puts on us, right? And I want to make sure that I am giving a voice to Black trans women who are dying daily. I want to make sure that I am stepping up and using my voice for these people. And so allyship for me is leading by example, making sure that I show people that there is a place for allyship for all of us. And so hopefully I can help shed some light on that in this conversation.
Thank you. And everyone joining us today, that's our amazing panel. Earlier, if you're just joining us, we had a slide which had the definition of allyship. The Rochester Racial Justice Toolkit, which was created by Nicole Nirorahara, defines allyship as a process in which a person of privilege work in solidarity and partnership with a marginalized group of people to help take down the system that challenge the group's basic rights, equal access, and ability to thrive in our society. So we heard about, thriving, leading by example, but I'm gonna open this all to everyone on the panel. What is the right way to be an impactful ally? Many of us are working remotely, but is allyship something that can be done online or in person? Like, what is the right way?
I think that there's a lot of different ways. I'll just use an example. When the protests started, our library was still closed, and we were all still in quarantine, just trying to make the best of it. And I knew we had to do something, and I felt really strongly about it. And I reached out to my staff and I said, what do you think we can do to remind the patrons that we're still here? and let them know that we're, you know, we hear them, we see what's going on, how can we help, even if we're all still home. And I got such great feedback. My whole staff was on board and everyone really came together. We made an I Can Make a Difference manual for families and kids. And it was really like a carefully curated list of resources. Like we went through every single one. It wasn't just thrown together. It was like the cream of the crop ones. And I think that that really helped us reach out to the community in a way that we were really struggling with at the time because we had been closed. And I think it also was a good step for my staff and for the library to show that we support the community. And just all along the way, I was really met with a lot of positive encouragement. My director was extremely supportive, and in turn, my staff was extremely supportive. So I think that if you have an idea, you just need to, you know, see who can help you evolve that idea into something. There's so many different ways.
Thank you. Thank you, Elizabeth. Anyone else?
Yeah, I'll jump in if that's all right. And maybe even more basic for me, it was just remembering. I don't know. I'm on this journey, but it just starts from listening, like real listening, and trying to recognize that when any BIPOC person is telling you this is how your actions are being received, believe them and listen to that. Try hard not to get defensive and not get caught up in your own intention. Right? Lots of people are like, oh, my intentions are, well, yeah, your intentions are good, but the way that your words or your actions were received were not. And to be able to move on from that, to not get defensive about it, and really, I don't know, not that it's a get out of jail free card, but just I'm endeavoring to do better. Right? If we're all just endeavoring to do better, like, and to mean that, right? To be like, I want to do better with this. I want to get this right. That's that's a hard first step to get past and to make that commitment. So I don't know, helping people recognize that it's okay to screw it up, but as long as you are on a path to trying to do better. And I'm sorry if I stepped on your toes, Karina.
Oh, totally fine. I would just add that allyship is a practice that's the active, consistent use of solidarity and power and privilege. For me, that looks like centering the most vulnerable and the most marginalized folks in my community's needs, amplifying their voices and following their leadership. Some of the work that I've done also involves mapping out my privileges and skills that I have to find out where I can make the most impact. And listening and learning, like Jeremy said, always listening and learning, but doing more, asking folks that we seek to be in solidarity with what support they actually need. And when we mess up, because we will, to be able to apologize and take accountability without centering our emotions. And Mia Mingus, who is a disability justice activist, does a really great job of talking about apologies and how to really take accountability in a way that doesn't do that. So I'm going to pop her link to her blog in the chat. So yeah.
So, we talked about intent and allyship as a practice. Allied coworkers are needed to kind of step it up, right? Especially when everything in the media dies down, to continue anti-racism work. How does one begin to do a personal self-assessment, individually or internally, to step into the role of allyship?
I really like reflective journaling. I think that can be a really useful tool in self-assessment. A book that really helped me in this practice was Becoming a Reflective Librarian and Teacher by Michelle Reel. And another great book, which is also available as a guided journal and like a book, is Me and White Supremacy by Layla Saad. So yeah, reflective journaling has been really key for me in thinking about self-assessment and stepping into that role, because we really need to not just focus on you're doing it wrong, but like, hey, like we all have work to do every day. This is a lifelong process. We don't just like reach the end and then we're done with this work. It's for life.
Yeah.
I think also identifying your privilege, but then also figuring out how you're going to use it is really important, because it's kind of like step one and step two, because we can all pivot our privilege and use it on some sort of platform and figure out what your in is. How are you going to help and actually be an active ally as opposed to like a passive one? And I think that's really important when you start your journey, especially to really, you know, think about that and sit with it, because we all have some sort of privilege, and most of us have some sort of, you know, marginalized group that we also belong to. So try to figure out where you fit in that.
And I think there's at least for me, there's an opportunity to talk to other white folks. There's a lot of struggle that some folks are having around the concept of accepting privilege, right? To just recognize that saying that I have white privilege, that this exists, that somehow that doesn't degrade the fact that you've struggled, that maybe you grew up poor, or you had other challenges but you recognizing that you still had some intrinsic privilege just by virtue of being born white, that doesn't discount the struggles and the things that you have accomplished. And I think that's a challenge that I see, within my own community, that people have a hard time, that recognizing the disadvantage of others doesn't somehow, take away the things that you've accomplished. So having that conversation and trying to shine a light on that is, a place that I come back to often.
And I just,
Oh, yeah. Sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to add that, when we have these conversations about allyship and self-assessment, I think it's totally okay to be self-aware and know where you, what you're good at, what your strengths are, and how to use those things to be impactful, right? Like, not every person is the person who needs to be outside protesting, right? Like, that might not be your thing, and that doesn't have to make you less of an ally because that's not your path. So finding what the path is for you, and yes, it is still to push yourself, to challenge yourself, to get outside of your comfort zone, because Black people are uncomfortable every day. But no one is saying that there's only one right way to do this. And so, even for me, in trying to figure out, what could we do to uplift Black librarians' voices right now? Like, we thought of this webinar series, and that was our act of protest in this moment. And so just trying to make sure that in the self-assessment, we feel confident in what we bring to the table, but bringing it to the table.
Thank you. I think there are some characteristics that you all identified, especially of white supremacy, that unconsciously operationalize norms and standards in libraries. And it makes it difficult, if not impossible, to open the doors to other people and cultures. Examples include, maybe the lack of holiday observance, Juneteenth, Indigenous People Day, or Chinese New Year, or being able to identify the lack of inclusion and diversity of perspective. Is a first step to, use one privilege for a truly multicultural organization. But what else can a person or their community do to shift the beliefs and behaviors of librarians and their boards of trustees in supporting racial justice?
I think this is a really tired and imperfect answer, but it had a lot of impact at Cornell, where Wendy Wilcox, Eliza Bettinger, and I started a reading group around social justice and librarianship a year and a half or so ago. And it really seemed to make an impact in terms of empowering librarians and library workers to actually do the work and start addressing systemic racism in our libraries. We were able to make people feel invested and like they all had a part to do in this, instead of just saying, oh, Diversity Council, here's all these things we want you to do. It's not our job, like it's everyone's job. And I think that reading group really helped people feel invested, like they had work to do within their own departments and divisions, which is something that was a good fit for our cultural landscape.
Okay.
I can just make a point. I think it's really important that organizations, specifically libraries in this conversation, you know, we see and appreciate the effort towards anti-racism, right? But we also have to shift and understand that like Black people are not only our trauma, and it is hurtful that you only step up when it is after a moment of trauma, right? And so like, I don't just want to see you stepping up and saying Black Lives Matter when there's another police shooting, right? Like that shouldn't be the time that you're telling people to read books about anti-racism. You should be telling people to read books about anti-racism 365 days a year, right? Like that should be a constant thing. We should be, if sexual harassment is a training, we should be making anti-racism work a mandated training. We should be acknowledging this work that needs to be done on a regular basis. And I think that us leaving it for the worst moments, right? It only says like, you have to be being shot and killed for us to hear you, for us to listen to you, for us to care about you. And we deserve so much more. So just trying to, at every moment that we can, you know, like this has to be more than it's Black History Month. This has to be more than it is Hispanic Heritage Month. That is no longer acceptable. We are the gatekeepers of information. It is completely unacceptable for us to not take that seriously, and not show that we are worthy of that title every single day.
Yeah, I mean, we have many organizations, Rebecca, who have made public commitments to justice, equality, in support of underrepresented communities. And for the panelists who didn't get a chance to answer, how can libraries, you know, go beyond posting online statements and actually begin the work of activism?
I'd love to see libraries that normalize ongoing conversations about how they are best supporting and reflecting their entire community, so that their policies, collection development, the whole nine, are in that best alignment, and that it's not, you know, like echoing Rebecca, it's not, you know, Black History Month. It's something that's just it should be part of the annual report. Right? It should just be this ongoing portion of how the library is operated.
Yeah, I think absolutely anti-racism training being right up there with sexual harassment training is an absolute must. And even if you can't be one of those people kind of pushing it at like a state level, you can, you know, have that conversation maybe with your director. You can bring it up, hey, this is really important and this is something that's necessary. So I think even that can make a big difference, because all the people that are here are probably the same people that are here, you know, at all of these other talks. I've been at them all. I recognize a lot of the same names. We need the people that aren't coming to the talks. And even though they don't want to be there, they need to be there. And that's who we need to actually get through to.
Yeah. Speaking of the other talks, I mean, we had conversations about, you know, privilege, implicit bias, and microaggressions, and how they are relevant to the work of libraries. But which of these characteristics are at play, and how do they stand in the way of racial justice?
I've seen a lot of implicit bias trainings in libraries, especially with more and more trauma coming to the forefront of like librarians and library workers, white librarians and library workers' minds. And I've been really bothered by this, honestly, because we can't train away structural racism. Implicit bias focuses on racism at the level of the individual. And while this is important, it's insufficient to creating a culture where Black people and people of color can really thrive. If we're talking about implicit bias, we must situate it within a much larger conversation about how current inequities in our collective within our institutions like libraries came to be, how they are held in place, and what our role is in perpetuating them despite our best intentions. So basically, I want to be thinking about things at the interpersonal level, such as implicit bias, yes, but also the institutional and the structural levels within our collective, because unless all of these factors change, we are not going to chip away at this, you know?
Mm-hmm. Rebecca mentioned earlier that we're information gatekeepers. And the criminal justice system has unfairly targeted and incarcerated Black and brown people. How can libraries highlight this systemic issue?
I might go off a little, but there are some amazing resources out there on divesting from having cops in your libraries. Like, you do not need to call them, have them in your libraries, or have them reading books to children. This seems like really common sense to me, but I know it isn't for a lot of people, because a lot of us are still really invested in cops and prisons, which I can say as a survivor just create more harm. I am a survivor of rape and interpersonal violence and a prison abolitionist, and I see no reason for librarians or library workers to be calling cops, especially as much as they do. Before you say, like, what about this situation? What about that situation? I want to hear all the other things you have tried to do to diffuse or to solve the problem before you came to the solution of calling cops. Some of the other actions that we've done are organizing letter writing nights for incarcerated folks. Black and Pink is a great abolitionist organization that supports LGBTQ+ prisoners, and organizing book drives for orgs that deliver books to incarcerated folks. These are very small steps, but I really want people to be having conversations about keeping cops out of our libraries. This is not acceptable.
Yeah, I want to add to that. When we are discussing, again, I'm gonna keep going back to the idea of trauma. I need people to be aware of the pain of we are all seeing these videos of Black people on camera being shot by police officers. I stopped watching them at about Eric Garner. That's when I had to stop watching them. And the amount that there has been since then, it is heartbreaking. So imagine the pain that Black people are carrying with them. And then because they were eating food in the library and wouldn't stop, you called the police, right? You couldn't think of anything else to do. You couldn't figure something out because you had a homeless person in your library that was sleeping. These are not acceptable reasons to impose more trauma onto someone who is already dealing with so much trauma and pain. You're going to bring someone into their focus that is a representation of trauma, of literal death, right? And so you can't call and bring cops into a library, especially in our minority communities, and expect these people to respond positively. You're setting people up for almost failure, right? And we don't do this with all people. We need to be, and that's a part of it. We need to be honest about who we are calling the cops on. And if we can start with that, we can get to the root of the problem. If you are feeling threatened, why are you feeling threatened right now? Why are you feeling scared right now? Why are you feeling like this is your only option right now? Like Karina said, what else have you tried to do? So there have to be more steps before we are willing to subject people to more trauma that we don't need to.
Yeah, I want to take a page out of Karina's book and just, I see the chats are going a little, there's 47 on my screen. I am unable to read it at the moment. And I just want to thank you all for the conversations that you have going on to the chat, and do understand that when we're talking about race, power, and privilege, that this might be a traumatic conversation for you to kind of sit with. And, you know, do what you need to do in order to, I don't know, stretch, get a fidget, walk around, stand up. You know, it's hard to kind of sit with this information. But again, we're bringing these conversations for the heart, to at least have you all hear some of the great work that the panel have done in order to bring you the content and let you know what allyship is really all about. Author Roxane Gay, in her article for Marie Claire on Making Black Lives Matter, said, "Black people do not need allies. We need people to stand up and take on the problem born of oppression as their own without remove or distance. We need people to do this even if they cannot fully understand what it's like to be oppressed for their race or ethnicity, gender, sexuality, ability, class, religion, or other markers of identity." What does an examination of materials in our library's collection look like for allies?
So I think that a really, really important thing to note with this is please don't make people of color diversify your collection. I like, you know, it's a great first step to diversify your collection in general, but I'm sure you have lots of other capable people on the staff. And I've seen this quite a few places, and, you know, well-intended, but ignorance isn't an excuse for racism. It's just an explanation. And you can research this just as well. They might not actually know about all these different, you know, cultures and races, and you're just saying, oh, well, you're the token diversity person, so you can do this. So I just want to caution people with that first. But I think you need to also look beyond just journals. If you really want to get authentic reviews from like people of color, you can find blogs, and you can find all kinds of different people that are reviewing things, and you can kind of get more of that. If you're looking for more of an authenticity, you don't have to ask your staff members who are constantly asked to do all the diversity work. You can research it yourself, and then maybe you can read the books and then put them on your shelf.
Are we ready
Yeah,
to oh.
No, sorry, I was muted and I was trying to click it. I just want to agree with Elizabeth and just really quickly say, like, Black librarians are expected to know the collection in full and in total. We are expected to know what is most popular for amongst every part of the collection. There is no reason why Black people should be the only people responsible for, like Elizabeth said, diversifying our collection. It's harmful. It is tokenism. It is stressful for a Black person Black people are not a monolith. Black people are all different, right? And so when you give a Black person the job to represent all Black people because you think that, you know, one Black person is representative of all, that is a lot of pressure, right? Like, I don't even feel comfortable speaking for all Black people, and I'm Black, right? So like, you have to take that burden off Black people. And so I just wanted to add that.
Mm-hmm. That's a great point. I actually wanted just to take a step back from a question from the audience. Jessica says, you know, I work at the Finkelstein Public Library with Elizabeth, and after our tragedy, many employees wanted armed cops or guard in the buildings at all times. We are a population of primarily Black and brown patrons. How would this make them feel?
Yeah, I don't know if everyone's aware, but in February we had one of our security guards was murdered, and it brought up a lot of questions about safety. And then it was, of course, right before the pandemic. But this is definitely it's a factor. How do you keep your staff safe, but keep your patrons comfortable, and it's a safe space for them too? And I think that these conversations are important to deciding that, because I think a lot of times people don't think about everything that we've just said. They just think, I'm scared, this scary thing happened, and I feel scared now of all the patrons. And that has a lot of deeply rooted issues. And I feel like discussions like this can help, because there are, of course, ways to keep the staff safe and keep your patrons safe. So I think talking is the first step with that.
I always look to the leaders who are doing work around transformative justice and prison abolition, which are often led by survivors of violence in a lot of cases. And I think it's really important. Like, I don't have the expertise on that, but I know that there's a lot of people out there doing really great work on this. And I'm also sorry for your library's loss.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you for asking that question, Jessica. I just didn't want to veer too far away as I go on to the next question. How do we renegotiate group agreements during library programs or meeting room policies to include an anti-racist perspective? I mean, you mentioned looking to leadership. You mentioned many of you have provided examples of way to normalize diversity, but is there anything else that we can do with our policies, especially our meeting room policies?
I want to just quickly start this off by saying, when you go to a job for an interview, please feel empowered to know that you're also interviewing that job, right? It is not only you being interviewed. And so when I went to my interview for Brooklyn Public Library and they said, "Do you have any questions for us?" I said, "What is your stance on this? Do you feel that Brooklyn Public Library is a neutral space? In the case that something like X, Y, and Z happens, where does Brooklyn Public Library stand?" Start knowing who you're working for before you start working for them. You are entitled to that. If you have to put on your Twitter, not representative of my employer, like it goes both ways. We have to stop letting our employers feel like they have all this power and that we don't have it, right? So when you go in for a job interview, ask those questions. What is your stance on this? If this happens, what is your approach, right? I recently got a new job and I had an interview and I saw that on their Instagram, they had posted Black Lives Matter. Okay, so what are you doing? I'm just curious. I did see this and I appreciated it. Thank you for saying that. What's next? What's next in your plans to continue to show that Black Lives Matter? It truly starts from that step, right? And then it's about accountability all the time. So what are we doing now? This is coming up. Again, I know I said this in the beginning, but libraries cannot be neutral spaces. We cannot keep saying our doors are open for everyone. That it cannot happen, right? We can't say the library is welcome to everyone and the library is a safe space, because that makes no sense. It makes no sense. It cannot be both. And so, we have to just start feeling confident to speak up and say those things. And maybe that job wasn't the right job for you. And that's completely okay.
And Rebecca, I'll maybe springboard off too, and that you can't wait until a hate group is filling out the meeting room request form to then decide, oh, we need to think about this. The trustees and the board and the director, the way that you deal with this is to make sure that proactively you've addressed this question and you've put policies and procedures in place that will protect the library and protect the community from these groups, so that there is really no place for hate in the library.
Thank you, Jeremy. Thank you, Rebecca. I see, Karina, you're even populating the chats with resources. Taking a cue from the 2011 book, White Fragility, which is probably on every library's reading list. Due to white social advantage and lack of racial discomfort, they do not typically experience opportunities to build skills for critical thinking, self-reflection, and constructive engagement around race. That's page 58. White people must actively seek opportunities to build tolerance for racial discomfort. This process is uncomfortable. So my question to the panel is, what does it mean if a library stays silent about racism?
I think that we can't be public spaces and hubs of information if we're rooted in racism. I think that being silent, especially at this stage, it speaks for itself. If you don't say anything, it's almost worse than trying to say something. At least saying, posting something on your Facebook page for the library. At least that's a positive step. Because if we're not moving forward, we're going to lose our librarians of color. We're going to lose a lot of our patronage because they're just not going to feel comfortable. And they're not going to see, librarians, the kids aren't going to see someone that looks like them. And they notice that. And they're not going to feel as welcome. So we're going to whitewash the profession.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, like you're saying, Elizabeth, I had to go to an HBCU to even meet a librarian of color, and that can't keep happening, right? And if libraries continue to stay silent on racism when the majority of the kids in this country are now minority kids, right? Like, we have to change how we are looking at our patronage. Like, every year the library is fighting for funds, right? And we have to prove our worth. Well, who's helping us prove our worth? The people that need us are kids of color who don't have internet at home because of a digital divide, who are coming into the libraries to do their homework, who are coming to the library to play games and be kids, right? Like, it doesn't matter why they're coming into the library, but they are coming because they need that space, right? And so if we are using them for our statistics to get us money, the least we can do is also show that we care about them. Like, that is the least that we can do in our libraries. And when we are silent about racism, we are telling those same people, we don't value you. You're nothing more than a statistic helping us get a little bit more money. And that doesn't feel good, right? Like, that doesn't feel good. And we have to stop, or we have to shift or reimagine the conversation about things like censorship, right? Like, excluding lies from the library, we have to have a different conversation about how that is not censorship, right? Like, we should be speaking truth to power. We should be uplifting our communities. We are a service profession, and we should be serving all equally, powerfully, and being silent doesn't make that possible.
Mm-hmm.
We use the rallying cry that libraries are about equitable access to information. I've said it 1,000 times in advocacy settings. So it's about that equity piece, but it's bigger than that, right? It has to be bigger than that, because you can't have equitable access to information and not talk about equity at a more base level, equity within the community. And that does push the library into a non-neutral position of talking about anti-racism and how we're striving towards a more equitable community across the board, so that by the time people get to the threshold of the library, they have an equal footing to cross it.
Thanks, Jeremy. I was just waiting just in case someone was jumping in there and I didn't want to jump in. What advice can you give to well-meaning librarians or support staff who are judgmental of other non-BIPOC librarians or other support staff who just don't get it? Where their frustration or their arrogance really gets in the way of having meaningful dialogue.
I try to remember that I didn't always get it, and that you didn't always get it. My work and experience with harm reduction, we have this saying, meet people where they're at, but don't leave them there. So be willing to meet people where they're at, but make sure you don't leave them behind in the process. Like, just don't leave them out because they don't have the same viewpoints or the same education or experiences as you get. Because if they go out there, they're harming people still, and we don't. It's just like, yeah, I wasn't always where I'm at today. I am really grateful for the people who brought me to where I am today, and the resources they shared and the experiences they shared and the work they did to get me here. And I want to pay that same work forward to other people who aren't here yet.
Thank you. Thank you, Karina. We actually do have a question from Amelia. To preface, she says her library, I believe, is trying to get mandated anti-racist training for staff. Specifically, it has been approved, and she's trying, or this person is trying to find the best, most impactful training, if it's not enough. I have had the unfortunate realization that our staff will get about as much out of it as they can get from the mandatory sexual harassment training. How do I make sure that my upper management is acting when staff say or do something that contradicts the training they received? And I think it fell more in line with this question as well.
I'm not sure if I understood the end of that question correctly, but I'm going to answer with what I thought I heard. But, you know, I don't fully know what the right training is just for that first part. I think looking to people of color or things like this, right? Like having organizations that do this and leading them to them. I do have a problem with sexual harassment training. Like, it's not well done, and it deserves to be better, right? And that's another conversation, but it's a step in saying, like, if you are sexually harassed at work, that should mean that there are consequences, right? And there is a guideline for what those consequences are supposed to look like. There is now a guideline for holding people accountable, and we need that when it comes to anti-racist training. We need a guideline that will let us know we're being heard, consequences are being given, there is discipline, there are conversations that are had. You know, the amount of micro and macro aggressions that Black people face on a daily basis at work, I mean, no one deserves to work in a setting like that every day, but it happens every day because it's so normalized and there are no consequences or repercussions of it. And anything that a Black person does, and it's, oh, the angry Black woman is mad because you were rude, like, and you know, and so I think that we have an issue where Black people are often they're left to we're left to fend for ourselves. And when we take it upon ourselves to mitigate the situation, it results in people saying, oh, like, that was really defensive. Like, oh, you're really angry. I don't know. Like, what's that about? Rather than the accountability being placed where it should be. Right. And we need models that will help us create that accountability.
Right. And I also, you know, I think with that question as well, there are many resources that are being added into the chat. And even though your board may have approved only one anti-racist training, you know, make it a continuum, as Jeremy said, or Elizabeth said, make sure that, you know, it's not just the training, that maybe there's follow-up conversations that you can have via Zoom with the team, starting the book clubs that many librarians have recently did, finding 10 minutes a day to kind of have like these discussions or daily reminders. I think you said it, Rebecca, it's 365 ways and 133 resources and things like that to kind of extend the conversation beyond just that one training. Same thing with sexual harassment training as well.
I think that also, I just want to add that as allies, we can help fill in those gaps. When you see something that's a blatant racism or a microaggression that someone might not even realize that they're doing, shut it down. Just shut it down immediately. If you do it enough times, it starts to come naturally, and that's just like what you're going to do when someone says something racist. You're like, that was extremely offensive. You know, you interject. You say that's actually not their burden. You can do that. Or, you know, and if you get in the habit of saying these things, other people will start to normalize it. And again, even if it's just in your library, that's a big step, you know, because then you're changing the culture there. So I think that that's a really important part too.
And recognize that that first time is real. It's scary, right? The first time where you call someone out, you're calling another adult out that what you said is offensive and wrong. And it's, yeah, you get that little fight or flight. But then it's important to know that in your courage and your willingness to do that, there's somebody else that sees you. And that might empower them to also carry that forward. And it does. Those one little thing, you know, they all add up and they do change, hopefully slowly change you can change the whole culture.
I would like to add to what Elizabeth and Jeremy said, that like, don't wait until you're in private to support your Black colleagues. If you're in a meeting, stand up for them. If you're replying to listserv, this is one of the times, like, reply all. Like, don't wait until like it's a private situation, or be like, celebrate them, stand up for them, and support them publicly. Like, learn to interject and interrupt. And if you feel uncomfortable, think of how uncomfortable they're feeling. And if you're feeling uncomfortable, one of the things that can help is to like have a little script or a little thing that you know you're going to say, and practice it when you don't need it. Like, practice it. So when the situation does happen, because it will, you know what you're going to say, and you can be prepared to interrupt and interject and shut it down.
And I just want to add to what everyone has already said. As an ally, yes, we appreciate you stepping up for us when we are around, but please keep that same energy when we're not around. When you're by yourself talking to a colleague who is not a person of color and they slip something out, even if there's not a single other Black person in the room, it is still your time to say, like that wasn't okay. That was really offensive. That made me uncomfortable. I would prefer that you didn't say things like that. It is not meant to be left for the moments when there's a Black person around to like give you a cheer afterwards. It's for all the time.
Yeah. In a racist society, it's not enough to be non-racist. We must be anti-racist. Angela Davis said that quote. We would like to offer the panelists and coming up next, the participants, an opportunity to define what anti-racist means to you concerning allyship. This is like the closing question.
A lot of it is just the difference of not being the person that's saying the racist remark versus being the person that stops it. Kind of just what we were just talking about. It's the active versus passive. Okay, you're not racist because you don't say racist things, but do you stand there when someone says racist things? Because that's still racist. I think a lot of people don't realize that. You know, this isn't something that you go to a couple of these talks and you're like, oh, I get it now. You know, you read White Fragility and you're like, yeah, I got it. I did, you know, the black square on Instagram. I'm good. This is something that you're constantly doing. You know, you're opening these conversations, you know, with your close people, your family, your friends, but also with people that you might not know that well. And like Jeremy said, it's really scary the first couple times that you do it. It makes you feel really uncomfortable. But that means like the more uncomfortable you feel, the more awesome what you're doing is, honestly, like point blank. And once you realize that, it's a lot easier to do it. So it's all about being active versus passive, I think.
Mhm.
Adding on to that, it's not about who you are, if you have good intentions or bad, or whatever. It's about what you do in solidarity with like your colleagues, your staff, the people around you, your communities, your patrons, just like, and it's an active and consistent everyday practice and process.
Mhm.
And that every single one of us, to whatever extent we have, does have a voice, and important that we just use whatever we've got in whatever way we can.
So, what is allyship? Allyship is a proactive, ongoing, and incredibly difficult practice of unlearning and reevaluating in which a person of privilege works in solidarity and partnership with a marginalized group of people to help take down the systems that challenge that group's basic rights, equal access, and ability to thrive in our society. Thank you, panelists. Are you prepared and ready for the questions of our, how many participants do we have? My screen is a little small. Of our over 90 participants that we have here. And I'm going to be fielding some of these questions for you all. Daylily said, I tell coworkers who are nervous about speaking up that their job is not to be liked. Your job is to lead and lead by example. Great. And for those of you who are familiar with Zoom, you can just type in your question right there in the chat screen. I had my window in the panelist view, so I wasn't able to see if you sent anything directly. How do you, I think Joanne asked, how do any of you get your documents translated in Spanish? Are we multilingual allies? Panelists, are you using translation services to kind of?
I know that Brooklyn
assist?
Public Library, does. I'm not exactly sure. It's a very big system, and there is a marketing department. So I know that we, especially because we have such a large Hispanic population, all of our materials are usually translated into Spanish. You know, I do think that it's important to, with something like that, make sure that, you know, in library school, we all have to do an assessment of different communities and demographics and understand our community. And then based on that, make sure that we have the materials for that community. I think it's also important that like we bring in people who can speak those languages. There shouldn't be a library in a mostly Hispanic community where there's not a single Spanish speaker, right? And like that is an amazing opportunity to go out and find them, right? Like there's no excuse at this point. And so, yeah, I do think that things are being, I don't know how easy it is for smaller systems, so I don't want to speak for them, but I know at Brooklyn Public Library, there are definitely translations.
Okay, thank you. Jonathan wrote, what can we do to challenge the myth of library neutrality, which is just so widely believed and ingrained?
I hate this. Go ahead, Karina, go.
I think drawing on the work of Black feminist activists who do a lot of work around standpoint theory and situated experience could really help build a strong argument fighting against the myth of neutrality in libraries. Because to be neutral means to just believe what the status quo, which is ingrained in a white supremacist heteronormative patriarchal society that's like ableist and all sorts of like whack is like just okay and doesn't challenge that. And that's a standpoint and situated in the lived experiences of certain people over others. So like, I think drawing on that work could be really useful in pushing back against the myth of library neutrality.
Adrian says that BIPOC is offensive because it flattens a variety of people with extremely different histories and contribution to this society into one group. Does anyone want to touch on that or discuss that statement?
I don't have a good answer. I think that that's something for me that will be a place to do some more learning. That is actually a point of view that I am hearing more lately. And so that's something for me to go back and to learn a little bit more about. I wish I could give a better answer than that, but I just want to be transparent that I have, of course, my own work to do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I know the New York Times had a piece about capitalizing the B and lowercase b in Black. And so I was actually doing work around that to kind of see what that means.
Capitalize that B. Don't care. Just do it.
Okay, Erica. Hi, Erica wrote, from reading White Fragility, you mentioned that a friend told her that she shouldn't have brought Robbins DiAngelo's book because as a white person, she shouldn't be profiting off the anti-racist movement. What should Erica say to that person? About not supporting White Fragility.
I think it's, you know, where there is an opportunity to read directly from the source, it's always preferred that you do so. But I think it's okay to have a starting point, right? And I think that if you think of it as like, if your entire group of friends, or if you have a small circle of friends and they're all white, it doesn't mean that like you shouldn't be speaking about anti-racism, right? So like maybe this is your first step. This is your introduction. You have a white person speaking to you that you think could help with some sense of relatability or familiarity, and like that, you want that to be your starting point. I don't think that there is something wrong with that. I think it could still be valuable with the right intentions, but I do think it's important to know that like it can't end there, and that now that you've had that discussion between, you know, your friends, your family, it's time to like branch out and hear voices, to hear Black voices and hear directly from them what they ask of you, what they need from you, and then you can take that and then relay that back to your friends and your family as well.
Yeah, I think definitely what Rebecca just said, just jumping off that, a lot of people really just feel comfortable talking to, you know, white people feel comfortable talking to white people. So that you're going to start with a book by a white person. That makes sense. That's kind of what allyship is. That's what we're talking about, that we can kind of use our privilege. Like she figured out how to use her privilege to help this. She wrote a book. You know, how will you use your privilege with what you've learned to get to the next thing?
Shayna commented, if libraries are neutral, how come just 2 generations ago, my grandmother couldn't go to one? That's what she would tell people who believe that libraries are neutral. And then I think Marsha maybe is responding to Erica saying, do you feel to tell that person who questioned white fragility, do you feel the same about Jane Elliott, Tim Wise, and Peggy McIntosh? So I think that is a discussion happening there. But Erica said, thanks, Rebecca. speaking of the colleague that's being trained, I think that policing in the library is important to look at also. And as someone else just put, to tell a librarian not to buy a book is like asking them to censor. I don't know. I mean, I know I'm not a panelist, but I think, you know, we could just freshen up on our collection management class and talk about what, you know, I don't know, decolonizing our stacks. I'll just leave it there. Someone has a follow-up question about the term BIPOC. Is it the full term or just the POC part of it that's offensive? That's the part that lumps people, right? Again, I guess maybe that was a question for Adrian, who proposed the initial question. But someone do agree that, yes, let's brush up on our collection management. There's a wealth of information there that can really talk about censorship and what we can allow and not allow in our libraries, and our collection management policies should be viewed and looked at through a racial lens. As someone indicated, their, you know, grandparents 2 generations ago wasn't allowed. So someone made that call. And so let's not look at our stacks as stagnant collections and look at it as how we can truly diversify and truly refrain from having marginalized communities feel oppressed when entering our spaces because of the books that we offer, the statement that we support, or the stance that we feel is just comfortable at the moment. I mean, you all have done great work, Jeremy, Karina, Elizabeth, Rebecca, for the stand-in. We have what about multiple viewpoints? It's kind of hard for me to, if you can write full questions in the chat, it would assist me in asking the right questions that you would like the panelists to kind of touch on. But I think what's offensive is the full term of BIPOC. Again, you know, that's a conversation maybe that we can, you know, I encourage you all, create a webinar on it. It just doesn't stop here. We have opportunities, I guess, within NYLA to submit a proposal. The conference is happening soon. New York Black Librarian Caucus Gala is happening soon. We're going to hear a bit of information from that, I believe from Emily or Rebecca, I'm not sure. You're going to talk about it. But yeah, feel free to submit proposals if you feel like there's content there that you would like to share within the profession. It just doesn't stop at this forum. And I encourage you, you find something that's offensive and we're using it within the profession, let others know your rationale, do your literature review, make the white paper, let us know, and how we can correct ourselves. I think we're open enough to say that we're in a learning environment at this time.
Yeah, and you know, we can go ahead and start wrapping this up. I just wanted to say thank you to everybody for being here today. Thank you to Taina. Thank you to Jeremy, Karina, Elizabeth. Thank you also to Joy Scott, who at the last minute had something come up and she wasn't able to be here, but she was supposed to be on this panel, so I do want to recognize her as well. I want to just let everyone know that we have our last and final session next week. I will add that into the chat room for the registration form if you want to start registering early. It's going to be a Skillshare session, and you'll get more information on that in the next couple of days about what that will mean, what that will look like. But we are really excited. I don't think that we ever imagined these sessions going as amazingly as they have. So we fully appreciate, on behalf of the New York Black Librarians Caucus, we fully appreciate everyone's support, everyone's participation. Thank you so much. I also just want to mention, if you are interested in joining the caucus, you can do so on the NYLA website. You can add it as a roundtable for an extra $10 onto your membership. If you are not a member of NYLA, but you want to support the caucus, you can also join as a friend of the New York Black Librarians Caucus, and that's another way that you can do that in support. You can go on the website and, you know, for everyone who is wondering how we get more Black people in the profession, we have scholarships that will help to do so. You can donate to those scholarships. Anything that I'm forgetting, since I
We
jumped on
have
this
the
panel and
we have the Andrew P. Jackson scholarships. So for support staff. So if any of you are working with a colleague who's currently in school, trying to obtain their bachelor's degree, look out for the website for additional information on that. We're just finalizing the application process, and it's due by October 15th, in time for a virtual gala, as Rebecca was talking about, which is Saturday, November 14th, 2020. That's 11 a.m. to 4 p.m. It's virtual. Of course, with the pandemic, it has thrown us off, but we are, you know, celebrating our 50th anniversary, and we really want, as you said, either your support for physically attending. You can purchase your tickets, or by, you know, donating to the scholarships. And I see someone posted in the chat as well that there is the Spectrum Scholarship that also has a scholarship through ALA. Dana M. Sinclair is our current president of the New York Black Librarian Caucus. She has done amazing work, so please check out all of the things that she put on the page that someone who just posted, that Jeremy just posted to the scholarship, and Rebecca just pointed to the form. It's popping up on my screen as chat. Is Emily, do you want, oh, Rebecca. Okay, she said you.
yeah, so that's all. We can go ahead and you know, end on time, end a little bit early. So again, thank you everyone for dropping in and being with us here today.
There was a question earlier about where someone will be able to find the video as this is recorded.
They all get posted to YouTube. So the first 4 sessions are already up on YouTube. If you registered for any of the events, I usually send them out in a follow-up email with the YouTube attached. You can also find that on our Instagram page. The links for the YouTubes are there. I can also go ahead and post them to the Facebook, so the links are there. But if you type in NYBLC on YouTube, our page will come up right away, and you'll see all of our sessions listed.
Thank you for that information. All right, everyone. Thank you for coming. This has been great. And be an ally, repost this video when it's up on YouTube and share it with your friends. And they can see how amazing Jeremy, Karina, Elizabeth, and Rebecca is.
Thank you very much, everybody.
Take care.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.